Hello everyone, I'm Susan Fuge, and for those that don't know me, we have been in this ward for 26 years and raised our family here. I just want to say that I'm sad that we can't be together and make this more of a discussion, since I've always felt that the collective wisdom of any group is greater than any one person. I do hope that what I have learned from my training and experience as a counselor will be of use to you. Tonight, we are going to talk about resilience, what it is, and how to build and maintain it to help us face our challenges in life. So what is resilience? The dictionary defines it as the ability of a person to adjust to or recover readily from illness, adversity, major life changes, etc. The fact is, it's not a matter of whether we will encounter difficulty in life, it's a matter of when and how. And the most important thing is how we respond. So I've identified 5 areas that I think are important for resilience, and those are acceptance, growth mindset, managing our thoughts and feelings, mindfulness, and self-care. Our first area is acceptance. And acceptance is the opposite of resistance, which we often engage in when we sense that we're being pushed out of our comfort zone. Things change, and we find ourselves yearning for the way things used to be. We want things to get back to normal so we can go on as we were. Sound familiar? But life is not meant to be stagnant and repetitive, is it? We are born, and someone is there to meet all of our needs. And yet our nature propels us to strive to master our physical bodies, and our brains are busy processing data to make sense of our existence. There is truly no point in life where we have arrived and can coast through on autopilot. Life presents us with changes and challenges all along the way, and the skills we develop as we meet those challenges help us to meet the challenges even further down the road. So what do we do when we meet these challenges? So when problems present themselves in our lives, we do have options. And of course, most desirable one would be to solve the problem. But there truly are some problems that are not solvable. But we still have options. We can change how we feel about it, accept that it is what it is, whether it's deserved or not. Or we can choose to stay stuck in our misery. I just want to acknowledge the difficulty in this. It sounds simple. We just change how we feel about it, right? But I know that it's not that easy. I just want to share about early in my marriage, my husband and I had our first baby, our oldest son, Bob, and about 3 months after Bob was born, I was ready for a girl. I just thought I was ready for another baby. And so we started trying fairly soon. Over the next 2.5 years, I did get pregnant 2 times and lost both of those pregnancies. I lost them very early on. I think of them more as pregnancies than babies, but it was a loss. And after those 2 times, then we continued to try and get pregnant, but went a year without even being able to get pregnant. So we did everything that we knew how to do at that time to solve that problem, but it just wasn't working. And at some point, after a year of fasting and praying about this, I finally decided to give this up to God and leave it in His hands. And eventually we did get pregnant, and we were blessed with a family of 8 children. But I just share that story just to acknowledge to you that I know how difficult that process of acceptance can be. That when we're facing really hard times, it can be difficult to accept that this is our challenge that we have at this point in our lives. But acceptance helps us to come to a point where we have some peace with the challenges that we're experiencing. When we are faced with a trial, we may be tempted to ask, why me? It is a common response in times of uncommon stressors. The problem is that there is not a satisfactory answer to that question. It's okay to ask it. Just let go of the expectation to get a clear answer. Recently, I listened to my husband giving one of our young adult age kids a blessing. In it, he said that Heavenly Father had selected just the right trials and struggles to help them learn and grow in the ways Heavenly Father wanted them to. What if that is true for each of us? I also want to just share with you something that I learned from my good friend Jordan when her husband was dying from brain cancer. And that was that God will meet you where you are. Jordan shared that she could go to him with anger and raging. She could go to him with fear and uncertainty. She could take any of her hard emotions to him, and he would meet her there. We can be angry or frustrated or full of fear about the trials that we're asked to go to, and we can take those to Heavenly Father, and He will meet us where we are and give us strength to go on. I'm going to end this section on acceptance by asking if we're addicted to our suffering. Sometimes our struggles, our victimization, our suffering become the most familiar components of our lives. Depression, shame, anxiety, bitterness, grief, sickness, and addiction become weirdly comfortable and predictable after a period of time, so much so that we have a hard time imagining life without pain. We even become afraid of life without struggle. Who will I be without the struggle? Any unknown creates angst, and when we are addicted to our suffering, we become very much afraid of change. This fear leads to behaviors that sabotage our resilience and keep us stuck. These behaviors can be described as help-rejecting complaining. Taking specific, clear steps will alleviate suffering and allow us to become unstuck. When those steps are rejected and the complaining persists, then help-rejecting complaining immobilizes us and ensures that suffering will continue. This leads us back to where we started with acceptance. What do we do with a problem? Solve it, change how we feel about it, and accept that it is part of our life right now, or stay stuck in our misery. Nothing on that list is easy, but while staying stuck and feeling miserable is easy in terms of not having to do anything different, it is not the best place to be for the long term. I'm not telling you not to feel your feelings. We're going to get to that. We definitely have a right to be sad and discouraged when things are difficult, but resilience is about not staying there for the long haul. So next we're going to talk about having a growth mindset. Having a growth mindset is important to resilience because it involves movement. It keeps us from being stuck and stagnant. So I've included some lists here to just kind of illustrate the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. In a fixed mindset, we might think I'm either good at something or I'm not. In a growth mindset, we will think I will get better when I keep trying. For a fixed mindset, we might think some people are born with that talent. A growth mindset says I am capable of learning new skills. A fixed mindset says things like, this is too hard. I give up. I suck at everything. There's no use even trying. Whereas a growth mindset will say, this is important to me and I am willing to invest time and effort to learn this skill. One place where our growth mindset will show up is when we make mistakes. Mistakes are our best teachers. We can learn more from our mistakes than we can from accidentally getting something right the first time. Mistakes teach us what doesn't work. We are here to learn, not to be perfect. So what are we modeling for our children? Do we own our mistakes? Do we look for what we can learn from them? One of the most meaningful gifts a parent can give to a child is to acknowledge their own mistake, to say, I was wrong here, or I'm sorry. This is so powerful because it also gives the child permission to make a mistake, to admit having messed up, and to still be okay. So before we just, encourage ourselves to just get moving and go ahead, we need to acknowledge our feelings. Hurt, disappointment, frustration, anger, sadness, they are all normal emotions that show us how we feel about something. Name it to tame it. If your child can identify what they are feeling, name it for them. We can say, if I lost a soccer game, I would be disappointed. Is that how you are feeling? Or you really wanted to win this game. I can see why you are so angry. Or for ourselves, we can acknowledge, I'm really hurt that my husband didn't notice my new haircut. This is where we learn to ask for what we need. We might think, I'm disappointed that we can't get a new refrigerator. I've been putting up with this one for a long time. Much of our frustration in life comes from circumstances not matching our expectations. Whether or not we can control the circumstances, we do have a choice in how we respond to them. So we're going to talk about our thoughts and feelings next, but I want you to remember to really allow your feelings. Not take them out on those around you, but notice them and acknowledge how they are affecting you. And don't judge yourself for having those feelings. Feelings are messengers that tell us things about ourselves. Every emotion is valid, and when we notice them and name them, they often have a way of resolving themselves. Our next section is thoughts and feelings. There are a lot of concepts I could cover here, but I only have time to hit a few highlights. What I would like you to take away from this section is that our brains are wired to protect us, and they do this by looking for problems. A lot of our negative self-talk is the brain trying to keep us from experiencing pain in the form of disappointment or rejection. But we have the capacity to reason, and that allows us to recognize negative self-talk as being only one side of the story. It's up to us to challenge our doubts and fears and to question the what ifs and why me's and determine how to move forward. Building resilience requires replacing false thoughts with truthful ones. The brain produces automatic negative thoughts as a protective device. It is up to us to fact-check those thoughts and replace them with more realistic and balanced thinking. Remember, negative thoughts produce negative energy, and positive thoughts produce positive energy. Just try it. Either, ugh, I have so much to do today, I'm tired just thinking about it. Or, today is going to be a great day. I can't wait to get this done. I know I'll be tired at the end of the day, but it will be worth it. Transforming our thinking is how we bounce back from life's hurts. Notice that we are doing nothing with the circumstances themselves. We must allow ourselves to see our situations from a different angle and to engage in mindful gratitude by seeking out the subtle blessings within our trials. These actions literally change the pathways in our brains and result in measurable changes in our emotional stability, which gets us unstuck from our suffering. This speaks to the previous slide where we talked about negative thoughts having negative energy. Looking for the subtle blessings in our trials opens the door for little rays of hope and positive energy. It's not going to be a best day ever kind of feeling, but looking for anything good in our difficult times opens the way for hope to re-enter our lives. The fact is, every phase of life has its difficult parts and its rewarding parts. We can show up for both and not overly attach to either. By attaching, I mean when things are going well, that we're not necessarily saying, oh, I'm the greatest, I'm on top of the world, I rule the planet. Or when we're suffering, we start thinking, oh, I'm the worst, this is all my fault, look what I've done now. That's overly attaching to the ups and downs of life. We need to keep the perspective of who we are at all times and understand that everything in our life will come and go. I do want to add here that the 2 miscarriages that I had that I talked about earlier were very difficult losses, even though I was very early in my pregnancy with each of them. It helped for me to say to myself at that time that at least I knew I could get pregnant. However, it was not helpful for other people to say that to me. What gave me hope and solace in private seemed dismissive coming from others. What others need from us in the midst of their pain is just to hold space for their suffering. If you would like to learn more about how to help people that are suffering, I recommend an account on Instagram called Refuge in Grief. It's very educational on how to be supportive to people who are going through difficult times. I just want to acknowledge that some of these topics might be more difficult for some of us than they are for others. And if you struggle with your self-worth or you feel things more deeply than people around you seem to, automatic negative thoughts may impact you more, and you may have more difficulty letting go of them. It's worth the work to examine these patterns and replace negative thoughts with more balanced or positive ones. If you're in a state where your thoughts are more negative and you struggle to see any positives about yourself or your life, you don't have to navigate this alone. Whether you have a friend or family member that can help you reframe your thoughts about yourself, or if you need the help of a professional, please reach out. There is help available, and if it's too much to manage on your own, ask for help. If the earlier slide about being addicted to your suffering caused you any discomfort, please talk it through with someone you trust and figure out what your next step should be. So long as we are talking about our thoughts and feelings, it's crucial to understand whether we are experiencing shame or guilt and what the difference is. Hopefully all of you that are parents have learned this difference when correcting your kids. When we focus on the behavior, we are highlighting a choice that was made and that a different choice can be made the next time. This falls in line with having a growth mindset, which we discussed earlier. When we attack the person, whether it is our partner or our child or ourself, that is shame, and shame is not productive. Shame shuts us down and causes us to shrink. We all experience shame from time to time. It's that feeling of not being enough. It's normal, but what we need is to be able to identify when we are experiencing shame and to talk through it with someone we trust. Shame loves secrecy. Talking about it with someone supportive helps shame to dissipate. So shame is centered on ourself. We think that we're a bad person. Shame tells us that we're not good enough. Shame causes us to shrink and to hide. Guilt is centered on behavior. It's I did something bad. It's centered on behavior and it motivates us to change. It allows us to try again. Guilt is productive and shame is not. I highly recommend Brené Brown's work on shame and vulnerability. You can start with her TED Talks on those subjects and then read The Gifts of Imperfection. Remember that a growth mindset allows us to make mistakes, to be imperfect and still striving. Brené advises us to own our story, which just means accepting ourselves for who we are, warts and all. If we don't own up to our whole self, then we feel compelled to hustle for our worthiness, and we are more vulnerable to shame. Our next section is mindfulness. I've included it because of the value it has in centering us so that we can focus on our life moment by moment, which is all that we can really truly manage. Do you find yourself yearning for things to get back to normal? That time when we could hug each other, sit down and talk without a mask hiding half of our faces, or even just run to the store without worrying what we might be exposed to. Most of us are hoping for that time and those circumstances to return, but what are we doing in the meantime? Are we finding meaning in this time of quarantine? Are we able to see the blessings in the midst of the trial? This is a great time to practice some radical acceptance. Things are not what we want them to be. We did not do anything to cause this. Solving this problem is out of our hands. Thankfully, other people are working on the solution. And so we can't change anything but the way we feel about it. We can stay stuck in our suffering, or we can look for the blessings hidden in this challenge and fully accept it for what it is. This five senses activity is a great way to bring ourself into the present moment by focusing on what we can see, smell, hear, feel, and taste. We can pull ourselves into the present and center ourselves. Depression is often rooted in the past, and anxiety is usually rooted in the future. So if we learn to practice mindfulness, we can live in the present moment without ruminating on the past or just fearing the future. Gratitude is a mindfulness practice. It requires us to think through the ordinary events of our everyday lives and take note of what was worthwhile. Try making a list of all the events of your day, and then go back through and note what you are grateful for in each of those mundane events. There's always something that we didn't really think about or stop to appreciate in the moment that it was happening. Why is that? It's because we rush through our days, whether it be from task to task or crisis to crisis and then back to the tasks again. We seem to forget that we are living out our mortal existence minute by minute, and it is everything that it should be. Hard and frustrating, disappointing, so-so, just enough, and full of life and love if we are willing to see it as it is. If you're interested in learning more about mindfulness or developing some mindfulness skills, just go to YouTube and start searching and trying different things and figure out what works for you. Practicing gratitude is an effective way of counteracting our automatic negative thoughts. What we feed will grow stronger. So here we are, the final piece to the resilience puzzle. As women and moms especially, we are often socialized to take care of others. Sometimes we expect to wear ourselves out, meeting everyone else's needs. The airplane analogy is useful here. We're always instructed to put on our own oxygen mask first and then help those around us. This can be hard for some of us. If you have your self-care all figured out, I hope that you'll comment below and share what works for you. What I'm going to do next is just share 5 areas that we need to address in our self-care practices. Your job is to experiment and figure out what works for you in each of those areas. If you want a list of things to try or need some ideas, just Google self-care, and there are millions of ideas out there. Okay, so the first category is physical. Our physical health impacts our mental health, and there are always things to work on here. Remember that this is a process, not a one-time event, as in finding a diet and losing 20 pounds that we will gain back as soon as we are done with the diet. Make sustainable choices that will add up to better health in the long run. And remember, the focus is on health, not on appearance. Our next category is emotional health. Get curious about your emotions. What are they trying to tell you? Sometimes we are so busy, again, going from task to task, that we just shut our feelings down so we can get our stuff done. Pause once in a while and notice how you are feeling. Avoid placing judgment on your emotions. Just allow them to be. Journaling is one way to sort through emotions. Talking through things with a trusted friend is another. You can help your kids develop emotional intelligence if you make it a point to name your emotions as you go through the day and help the children to identify theirs as well. So it's up to you to discover where your creative passions lie. You may say that you're not creative, and maybe a balanced budget is the place where you really experience satisfaction, and that's great. My concern, if you say that you are not creative, is that you may struggle with perfectionism, which is often a facade for shame. We need to break that down and call it what it is. When we are thinking, I'm worried that anything I do will not be good enough, I just can't take that kind of pressure. It's because too often our creative processes have been open to criticism and judgment, or even comparison, which has been called the thief of joy. I have a policy that I'm allowed to play and that I can engage in creative practices with no intention of having a finished product. If I'm engaging in an activity that I have designated as just for play, and someone comes along and says, "What are you doing?" I answer, "Nothing." And if that answer isn't enough for them, then I say, "I'm just playing around." By then, they usually give up and walk away. I don't owe anyone an explanation for my creative practices. On our social side, we are wired for connection. Even my introvert slash socially anxious clients admitted that they needed their friends after 2 months in quarantine. Social needs vary from person to person and can change over the course of a lifetime. It's okay to get our needs met from different people. If your mom doesn't love you unconditionally, find a friend or mentor who can, but most importantly, learn to do that for yourself. We can build social connections as we pursue our passions by joining a book club or a hiking group. In those settings, we can find people we have more in common with and develop deeper friendships. It takes time to find that handful of friends who can truly give and take, who are there when you need them, and who you can show up for. We all need at least one person who gets us, one person we can share the big things or the hard things with, and we know that they won't judge or lecture, they will just support us. It may take time to figure out who that is for you, but it's worth it. The final area I have identified is spiritual. These 5 areas are not all inclusive, but these are core areas that contribute in important ways to our resilience. In this area, as with the other 4 categories of self-care, I want you to be aware of shame and guilt. The point of attending to these areas is to strengthen ourselves, not to beat ourselves up. That's why I subtitled self-care with setting goals based on how we want to feel. If we can identify what our desired objective is, it makes it easier to set goals that move us in the right direction. I want to also challenge you to identify what your current coping mechanisms are and whether they are effective and helpful. Addicts use substances to dull their emotional pain. It is effective, but it is not helpful, both because the problems are still there when the substance wears off and because the addiction tends to cause other problems in their life. So we like to joke about retail therapy, but we need to take a look at that, along with the amount of time we spend escaping on social media, and see if it is actually helpful in addition to being effective. Just shy of 20 years ago, I had my last 2 children within 14 months of each other. My husband was the bishop, and I was trying to do it all myself. I fell into a depression because it was too much to do on my own, and I did not know how to ask for help or take care of myself. With the help of medication and therapy, I was able to start moving through that. One thing I started doing was noticing how I felt. I could easily spend an hour on the computer scrolling through Pinterest. When I paid attention to how I felt afterwards, I knew that it had been an effective distraction, but it did not help me to feel energized, productive, or motivated. Identifying how we want to feel helps us decide what actions to take. To recap what we have discussed today, there are 5 elements of resilience that we've discussed. We start with acceptance, with learning to be okay with what is, as opposed to resisting the changes or challenges that occur in the course of our lives. One of the things that helps us with acceptance is cultivating a growth mindset, which allows for making mistakes, with struggle, and with not being perfect or right all the time. Those are exhausting fronts to maintain, being right or perfect at all costs. Next, we learn that our thoughts naturally tend toward the negative as a protective factor, so we need to be aware of that and balance that out with more realistic assessments. We also learn that our feelings and our thoughts are linked and that one can influence the other, so we can affect how we feel by altering our thoughts. Mindfulness helps us to be more aware of our feelings and teaches us to live in the present moment rather than worrying about the future or dwelling on the past. Finally, we had a brief conversation about self-care. My intention there is for you to begin your own exploration of what works for you. It will be an ongoing journey as your needs will change along with the challenges you face at each stage of life. I do hope you will leave comments about what works for you. I hope you found this presentation helpful and that you will revisit it as needed to help you navigate the challenges that you face.